2026. Mr. Zink, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Argo.
Here.
Mr. Horton.
Here.
Mr. Wynn.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Ms. Casper.
Here. I'd like a motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Zink, all you.
Who was the second? Sorry.
Alex.
I thought it was. I'm not used to the voices just yet. Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mr. Argo.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mr. Wynn.
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I need a motion to enter into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official for Ohio Revised Code 121.22. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Zink, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mr. Argo.
Yes.
Mr. Wynn.
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes, we will be back.
I did go over to Buenos Aires as well.
Where's Mr. Wynn?
I think he went to the restroom.
Behind your computer, Doug.
No, there's one here.
Behind your computer. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to pull us out of executive session, and we will go on with the agenda. Board President's comments. What I only have is to thank our maintenance, our custodial staff, Mr. Hatfield and his team for what they did last week. That was a lot of snow. And I know that it's, yay, yes, we can clap for that. And I know that it's not ideal, as I was at the East-West game and saw that there was parking spots that were lost because where are you putting 13 inches of snow? But they did an amazing job, and I think that sometimes that goes unappreciated. So we just want to thank Mr. Hatfield and his team, and apparently prepare for tomorrow. Dr. Whiteley.
I would just echo those same sentiments. It takes a village. It takes a village on a good day, much less when you have snow on top of that. As Ms. Casper just said, I have two phones in front of me watching the text message flurry from business managers and superintendents, so we are monitoring that closely to decide what to do about tomorrow. And I will keep you posted in the meeting as that unfolds. So,
All right, Mr. Zink.
Yeah, I was going to talk about, we had a very neat meeting today that was at Hamilton City Schools, put on by Ms. Blevins, the superintendent there, and a lot of the county treasurers. Senator Lang was there. I can't think of the other representative. One of the trustees or one of the commissioners from Hamilton was there, and had a good conversation about kind of the challenges that the schools are going through with property tax reform, as well as some of the formula funding and things like that. So it was a good conversation, hoping to have a letter go out to the representatives and senators kind of about what we're experiencing, as well as having follow-up meetings periodically on the move forward. So it was a good kickoff.
Is that it?
That is all.
Okay, under board reports, we have not met in our new committees yet this year, but linked in the online on the agenda is the board meeting dates and the committee meeting dates. And so if you are interested in any of those, they are online.
just a reminder, tomorrow we do have a planning meeting scheduled.
Oh, yes.
From 7 to 9 a.m. in conference room D&E. That's our work session. In theory, following that is a master facilities quorum meeting that would happen from 9 to 11. But again, weather pending, we're going to be watching that closely to see if both of those meetings can occur or what combination can occur depending on the weather.
And I will just verify that if we do have quorum facilities meeting, that both of you two will be able to attend. Perfect. Okay, now it's time for everybody's favorite topic, master's facility planning.
I have a chair up here that Tom is welcome to join us. I think he's in the audience. I think he saw us. Just always like to let you know when a guest is joining us at the table. I feel like Tom's not a guest at this point, right, Tom Fernandez? He's just kind of part of the fabric of who we are with master facilities conversations. But really, it's just an ongoing conversation. Couple of things, as we know, looking at the options in front of us, what those are. C1 and D1 are kind of the ones that have gotten a lot of traction and that we continue to talk about. On top of that, I think, is the timeline question of either May or November. And then last but not least, you certainly have the funding source. And there is a spot on the agenda, as you will see, if we choose to move that forward, that we could do so. It doesn't mean we will. But in those funding discussions that we had, like last week, I guess it was, or the week before, to keep those doors open, at least to have a continued conversation about whether it would be May or November. So with that said, I know Tom and Craig had a conversation this week that I think is important to just have an update on. So I'm going to turn it over to him to talk about his conversation with the state and our state share, just so you have that up front, and then we can flow into the timeline and the funding source pieces.
Well, I'm happy to report that for all those who doubted, the state did call, and your number is up, and they are going to be providing you funding as early as this summer. If you move ahead, if not, then it will be in November. The funding, they will fund a majority of the project, but some of the funding, the complete funding package for you will fall into place over the next 6 months to 9 months. But essentially, the early dollars are available already, and that'll happen in July when they normally have those dollars available. So that's great. What this means is that you're going to transition from being an LNELP district to a CFAP district. So there'll be a new master plan agreement that will be developed. We will need to know if we're moving ahead with C1 or D1 before we could finalize that agreement. So that'll be another piece of information we'll need from you.
Tom also reminded me that it might seem a little bit redundant, but there is a desire for kind of an update of an enrollment study, just to keep that fresh. I know it feels like we just did it, but they always want to keep that fresh, so we would complete like another questionnaire to submit to them to make sure that nothing has changed on that horizon. Also, I know that we had talked about going forward, just kind of making that enrollment study a steady cadence. Before they had changed the 5-year forecast kind of timeline, we were looking at October. We can look at that if that makes sense now based on the new timeline with the 4-year forecast. But again, having enrollment not just be tied around master facilities, but having that enrollment conversation kind of front and center going forward. So we would get an updated version of that kind of state version, not the John Mercurio version, but the state version that we would do that when we select the plan of sorts. So that was just an update on those pieces. To Tom's point, which kind of leads us back to our conversation, particularly with the number being called, choosing the option going forward, C1 or D1. But then I think also that question plays into the timeline or funding source. We had talked a lot about in our last meeting, there are different funding sources on the table as far as like income tax and things. We had decided, and I know Mr. Horton wasn't here for that conversation, but we had decided that just because of the lack of education around that with our district, we needed a little bit more time to explore that. I know there's also some, Fairfield is going on the ballot for an income tax in May, and so just kind of waiting to see kind of what unfolded with that. And it will be interesting to see that if in November, if property tax is abolished on the ballot, what a funding source will look like for all of us in the future. So I think income tax was certainly a discussion at a point, but we kind of put that to the side, just knowing that it was really, really new, not only for us, but really a majority of our community members to even talk about. So the two resolutions are more based on that property tax of 30-year and 37 years. But again, I think the big question probably at bay is that May or November piece, because that's the actionable piece that we would have to decide tonight to make the timeline for the February 4th filing, which is Wednesday.
So do we pick the plan first or the timing first? The option first or the timing first?
Well, the plan, I mean, and please disagree, anybody, but I mean, the plans are essentially the same money, right? I mean, yes, we have to pick the plan. But ultimately, the plans aren't that drastically different, right? You're talking about really 2 junior highs or 4 junior highs with some subtleties in what buildings that impacts, like the Adena in C1 versus the Hopewell and Hopewell Junior and Ridge Junior in D1. But money-wise, they're about the same.
Right.
They are the same. So I think really it's a combination of timing and option. And then again, that would beg the question of, is May, do we need to take the resolution for May?
Okay, who wants to start? Mr. Horton, would you like to start since you did not get to participate? We kind of did last time, the 4 of us kind of land on C1, so you want to get, since you weren't here, why don't you give us what your input, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think, given that we've got the 2 resolutions on the potential resolutions for the bond action items tonight, I think I'm still where I was about 2 weeks ago, which was I still don't think these plans and this funding approach is enough to excite people to want to come out to vote for this. And I say that because I think when I go back to where I was in November, I was a big fan of that plan. It did all the needs. It allowed us the future expansion about the curriculum that we wanted to. We tried to communicate that to the community, and we got 40% of people to come out and say, yeah, that this was a good idea. And in that time, what I've observed is us as a board, we're listening to the people who said no more, and we're talking to politicians who actively campaigned against it behind our backs, instead of listening to people who loved that idea. And we're basically coming forth, it's a simplification of this, obviously, but it's basically half the plan for about half the price, but the cost in taxes is going to be much more than half the cost that we originally proposed back in November. And so there's not anything in here that's going to really dramatically change the proposition that we went to the community with in November. And that's where I want to challenge us to think differently. I'm not in favor of putting this on the ballot in May because I don't think we have the answers that the community wanted, which is what does our class sizes look like after this? What specials will we have in place? Will we have world languages in the junior high? Will we have busing? I wasn't even here, but I saw all the pictures on social media of what what this parking lot out here looked like when all the bus stops couldn't be used because of all the snow. That's a snapshot of what every day would look like in either of these two models, and we haven't solved for that because in this proposal we don't have an answer on busing. And so to put this on the ballot in May is troubling to me. I don't think we've answered the questions. I think we've answered questions that people who were against it had, but we haven't really answered the question for the people that would be coming out to vote yes for this. And so that's my
Okay.
preference.
Thank you, Mr. Horgan. Who's next?
I would like to start with a question with the CFAP program. Say that we were to pick C1, for example, and tell them that that's what we wanted to do, and then when we do have more intensive testing with our community on that, the community says, yeah, no, like it needs to be D1. I mean, at that point, is there an opportunity to revise, or if we move forward at this point and tell the state that we're doing C1, we don't have any flexibility going forward?
No, ultimately, the state's here to serve the district and wants to make sure that you're a happy customer, you're their customer. So we would have to amend the master plan agreement at that point down the road, but it can happen. Now, there are districts that wait and even finalize the master plan agreement till after the election. So there is that possibility. It's always nice, though, to give them an indication of, yes, you're going, you're committed, so that they don't bypass the district and offer the dollars to the next one. So
Do you think we're at risk of them offering it to somebody else if we were to go in November versus
I think
May?
you want to give a good positive, no, whether you go in May or November, I think that you just need to provide them a good positive response.
Gotcha.
So, but there is time. Whether it's in May or November, there is time to get the right solution.
I guess I'll throw out another question. We talked about this a little bit last time as well. But when we're talking, May versus November, there's a lot more kind of uncertainty about what property taxes will look like come November. So if we were to be successful in May, what would we be able to get far enough and to be selling bonds, or to be kind of locked in, or?
Yeah, we would have that taken care of. It would just be the timing of the payback is what would be determined at that point in time. Let's go that route.
Okay. I mean, I've seen.
Yeah, that would get us the cash. It's just when we would be paying it back is what we would figure out.
I've seen lots of different plans out there. I saw there was a bill that was if we decide to abolish property taxes, the legislature was like, oh, well, we have this other plan, and you would pass all the debt onto the state, in the scenario where they were trying to get their plan instead of the one that the abolishment group is going for. And any debt that we had, the state would be responsible for. So there's lots of different variables here. You know, they talked about putting on an alternate amendment that would kind of mix things up as well. So there's a lot of unknown for me when I'm thinking about November that I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Lots of unknowns, for sure.
When I think about the May or November and the property tax reform that is being proposed, you need almost 500,000 signatures, valid signatures, to put something on the ballot. And the property tax group only has about a fourth of that. And that's only signatures they claim. That's not even valid signatures. So to me, I'm not really operating with the mindset that property tax or a constitutional amendment is going to be on the ballot in November. When I look at this, I really just look at the levy plan and no external factors. Well, actually, that's false. I do look at external factors, and the biggest one that I think of is voter turnout. And the Ohio Secretary of State's office says that, and I'm just comparing this to May of 2022 since that's comparable because it's not a presidential election year. But May 22, we had almost 21% turnout, and that was in the May primary that they had. And in November of 2022, they had 53% turnout. And so when I think of the question of May or November, to me, I think of, do we want to hide this levy plan from the community, or do we want to put this in front of as many people as possible? You know, anyone has the constitutional right to vote. I understand that. But I also think we have to act with a little bit of realism here. 80% of the population is likely not coming out to vote in the May primary. And so to me, if 80% of our community is not signing off on this plan versus in November, if 50% of the population comes out to vote, it might not be 50% of the community that approves this plan, but at least 50% of the majority of this community had the option to go out, voice their opinion, and then I think that that's a little bit more fair to do. It's a little bit more fair to the community, right? You had a lot more people out there. You put this plan in front of a lot more people, and if it succeeds or doesn't succeed, you at least gauge the community in a lot more of a realistic manner than you would if we put this on in May.
Adam, do you have, I'm going to put you and Dr. Whiteley on the spot. What are your thoughts? If you had to pick, he's going to smack me later. If you had to pick, do you think that the money piece is are we going to be good? What are your thoughts? You're the treasurer and you're the financial guy, and
How do you mean, the money piece? Do you
You're the
think we're
money.
good? Can you ask me the question differently?
how do you feel about May versus November? And how do you feel about May property tax versus a potential discussion on income tax if we went in November? We can't do income tax in May because we don't have time to educate our community.
Well, at this point, we only have the option to do the two that are on the agenda
Right,
tonight.
right.
Those are the only two that, so we don't even have to worry about the other. I have said, I will say this again, I've said this every time to the point that most of you guys will make fun of me about it, that me, the person, does not like an income tax. Me, the treasurer, does like an income tax. That's the best way I can put that. The reason I don't like that when looking at a project is it's going to cost me personally, because like most people, it's all about me individually. It would cost a tremendous amount more than if we did it as a property tax. Property tax is going to impact a much larger amount of people than an income tax would, because your businesses don't pay an income tax. It's only based on who lives in your district. Pulling some of the information together, now I'm going to go completely sideways down a different rabbit hole, and you guys are going to go, you totally didn't answer the question. So we'll come back to that too. But like, for example, if I look at certain reports, it'll say the average salary in Lakota being $118,000. Well, 1% income tax would be just under $1,200. We've seen that it says an average home price here, $320,000. Okay, if an average home price be $320,000, If you did the 30-year, you're looking at $277 per year. If you did a 37-year, you're looking at $246 per year. You know, so it's a much different. Now, if I look at different places, it is say that Westchester, I found an average income of $126,743. So it's not less than that number, you know, depending on who it might be. Liberty Township, $143,000, which is different than one of the pieces of data that we got at one of the breakfasts they had. So it's kind of all over the place. It's really hard to see. That's why you kind of have to talk about these mills based on a $100,000 house so that everybody can then apply the principles to how it would impact them. The same with, if you look at a 1%, then you can scale that back. You know, if it would have been, I think the option we had talked about at the last meeting was a 0.5% for earned and a 0.25% for a traditional. Well, it's because the smaller the base of people that could be paying it is, the larger the amount would be on the base of people. So the smallest impact we're going to run into is going to be the property, because we are very fortunate to have a very large property tax base.
Right.
That is a fortunate thing. It would be distributed over a lot of people. With that being said, going back into how we did this in November of 25, how we did that in November of 25, I believe that all of us would want to have conversations, kind of how I answered Mr. Argo's question of, we could then talk about what the timing looked like of the repayments. So assuming that the timing of repayment wouldn't happen in May of 27, which I don't know, I guess it could, but I don't know that it would. With the exception of that, we're going to have a timeline that's not going to be contingent on May or November of this year as far as the financing goes. Now that would kick the question over to the operational side and the timing of getting the buildings operational, running, all of that. But that's where I've kind of said this from the beginning. Once we established that we could get a 3-year run-up to begin the paybacks, that took a tremendous amount of the stress off of the financing. But it puts a lot of it over here to the operation to then say, where are we trying to get with timing? Where are we trying to get with having these buildings operational, ready to go, and all of that? There's possibility that, you know, you could do some of the things prior to November, you know, to get things kind of staged and prepped. But I don't know if we had initially talked about a window, was 29 operational for fiscal 29, the 28-29 school year. I guess the question would become, is May or November going to change fiscal 29 or fiscal 30, the 29-30 school year versus where we were? Because I thought that's where we were kind of at.
That is a question for.
So it's, as much as I would love to give you the great answer,
Of May or November?
I don't know that it's really a financing question for me at this time.
You're a politician. You don't even know. Dr. Wiley, do you have a preference on May or November?
I think of it from several lenses. You know, when you look at the plan that's in front of you, I do think it is a very fiscally responsible plan, right? And I also hear Tom's comment of, you know, inflation is $1 million a month, you know? So it's only going up, right, is what I mean by that. So May might be the most fiscally responsible option, right, that we might see.
I will chime in on that. I have said I don't see a feasible way that a ask could be based on the property tax structuring. I don't see a feasible way that it would be less than what this number is that we have on the agenda today. I believe that.
And Adam and I were kind of talking about that earlier today. But with that said, we certainly want to be fiscally responsible, but I also hear options like good, better, best in my head of, could you have a better option that might have a little bit higher price point, meaning it still has the LFIs in there, meaning it doesn't have kind of some deferred maintenance pieces in there that we could have discussions around our capital plan that we're getting ready to see in about 6 weeks or so from our new partnership. I also, and Adam and I talk a lot about this, which comes first, the chicken or the egg with strategic planning, and really it's probably, depending on how you slice it, in some ways having a strategic plan in place to drive these decisions seems very good stewards, that you have a North Star driving you in some of the design decisions that we would make and things like that. But at the same time, you can certainly build buildings, and then that comes secondary to say, I want to complement. So I don't think one drives it necessarily, but I do think from a community messaging standpoint about why some decisions would be made in design and things, I do think a strategic plan would help us. I also think, and we have not had our board retreat, that is upcoming on the 16th and 17th. But I do think being aligned in this decision is important for our community as well, because it shows that we're moving forward and we have a vision and being more in the same place than not. And so I think about that when I hear, like Mr. Horton speak, or when I hear Mr. Wynn speak, that I do think a collective moving forward would be helpful for our community to know that we are all supportive, but I also know that we might not get there.
Can I have a follow-up?
You may.
So we did have a follow-up to our community collaboration session. Dr.
did.
Whiteley and I went, had a good group, had a good conversation. Question did come to us that was, when bringing this up, that we were talking about going to be on the agenda for this evening. The question of Fieldhouse Community Center, stuff that we had talked about back in the fall. Did this include that? I don't believe we have. I think that we kind of got away from some of that I believe we have an opportunity to have a full community lift with this. I still have not given up hope that we could do that with our trustees on both Westchester, Liberty Township as a whole group to do something that would be a better benefit to the whole community than just us. I don't know that we have the timeline in May to get back to that. And that really wasn't pushed into this. So again, that's not going to be less cost. That would add cost. But when you look at, when you say fiscal responsible, sometimes that's not always the lowest cost.
Right.
But what we did find in the fall, if we could figure out a way to really join hands with all of our community to lift this together in a way. I know this sounds crazy and you guys are going to say I've really lost my mind. But if we can do that, that's going to help everybody. It's going to be, all of us rowing the boat together is going to be more helpful than everybody worried about what they can get or you can't get or vice versa, all of the above.
Tom, does the money, if it goes in, if we decide to go in November versus May, do you still have to wait to get the money on the projects that you can do ahead of time, like to get to that $1 million? That's what locks that in, right?
Well, you would be locked in terms to get the dollars as long as you let them know that you are moving ahead.
Okay.
So you'll sign a new CFAP agreement that will give them the information that's necessary. So
And when do we have to do the CPAP agreement?
they would like to see something in the next 2 months.
I said CPAP before.
Just, the sooner the better for them, because it allows them just to plan, because they're working with a lot of districts and wanting to make sure that they serve as many districts
Right.
well. And so if for some reason Lakota is not going to go, then it enables them to serve another district. So
What does November, Dr. Whiteley, do to our issues, our crowdedness, the buildings that are?
Yep, it's kind of a multi-pronged answer. So let's start with enrollment. Enrollment it's holding fairly steady, right? I mean, the growth that we expect to see is over a 10-year period, right? So we're not expecting 2,000 students to walk through the door, right, on August. But in our, as we've talked about in K-6, there are some buildings that it is tight, right? Like when you talk about 35 children in Independence, that is real, right? There are some things that we're looking at around alternative school of choice forms to make sure that we can have a really good handle and process to look at that. In the past, for ease, it's everybody's kind of just been kind of grandfathered in that, rather than looking at that enrollment and making sure it's not creeping up. We're going to be more proactive in that, to really look in K-6 to make sure that we are not only below our thresholds, but we have a buffer of that to anticipate new kids coming in, versus we kind of start high and we're building from there. So that will help some. It will not eliminate a problem, but it will help us keep a more fine-tuned process on that and looking at that. And that will be going out to families probably around end of February or so. I think also it's looking at sectioning and how things are scheduled. I'm speaking more in a K-6 world. What I mean by that is we might have to talk creatively about how to create another section to bring numbers down. Now, the problem with that is space, right? We don't have any really available classrooms. So we could be looking, and Mr. Nguyen experienced this on our tour the other day, we could be looking at like the Adena situation where you're using the hub more as a classroom and things are rotating through. So some of those universal spaces we would lose for flexibility. There are also things that we could look at in terms of, we can look at, I'm going to use the word proactive. I use that in the terms of like Hamilton is having to be in a very reactionary situation because of their finances, but we could look at some things that are more proactive, meaning kindergarten. Would we want to go to a half-day kindergarten model? Would we want to move to a tuition-based kindergarten model? Again, that doesn't help you with space, but it does help you with some enrollment pieces. It doesn't get classrooms free, but it helps with, but that only would help in kindergarten. You could look at specials. There are some proactive things you can do, but to Adam's point, those come at a cost, not necessarily, financial, but also other costs. So there are some things that we could look at. As far as maintenance, to continue to maintain some buildings that need, I'll say they need a little love, or maybe a lot of love, depending on the building. To really be able to kind of free up some maintenance money, we might have to look at some different fee structures. We might have to look at how technology is funded differently. There are things that we could do to help offset, but they would certainly be Band-Aids and more short-term fixes than long-term fixes. But again, I think we're talking May to November. We're not talking like May to the next May. But there could be some things that we could certainly put in place to help alleviate that and for a little bit longer. But class size is not going to be fixed overnight unless you do some major like restructuring of K-5, turn every building into a K-5 right now, and re-attendance, do attendance zones. And I don't think we're probably going to do that with it being February to August, but all options are on the table, I guess. But there are some things that we could look at from a maintenance standpoint to free up some funding. And then we could also look at, again, getting creative with the existing spaces that do exist, like cafeterias, hubs, sectioning, but sectioning does create a problem when you're out of space.
So I want to be clear, are you saying that any of those would be in place for next school year if we don't go on the ballot in May with this plan, one of these two plans?
I would say, I think whether you're talking May or November, I would look at maybe some funding structures as far as around like technology or how to free up some more maintenance dollars regardless. From an educational visioning standpoint, I'm going to hold on to kindergarten and specials as long as we possibly can. And for me to make that kind of educational change, that's me speaking, not you all as Board of Education, I would not want to have that conversation in depth until we would get to a point of another unsuccessful ballot. But if we happen to get to another unsuccessful ballot, I think we would be forced to look at some decisions at that point to say, what do we do next? Because 2 no's is different than 1 no.
Right. So those necessarily would not take place next year,
No,
obviously.
and for a variety of reasons. One, it's a lot of change for parents. It's a lot of, I don't think that that's being humane to our staff. There's just a lot of pieces in there
Right.
that when you're in the middle of February and hiring season, so I think we would be, whatever decision we make, we would be looking at 26, but 27, 28 decisions to give people enough planning time. Because I do believe if you were going to take away all-day kindergarten, there would be families that would make some different decisions. So we would not be looking at next year, but the next year.
And like you said, a second levy failure, or a second.
I think there'd be some voters that would make a different decision if that was what they were looking at.
I would have to say, I mean, I think we're all, well, maybe we're not all struggling with May versus November, but I will say, I think that, to Mr. Horton's point, that people are, that we're making a plan based on people who said no. I disagree, because I think we talk about being fiscally responsible, and I have had, since the levy failed, which is interesting, people say to me, you talk about fiscally responsible, and I believe you're not being, because you've been kicking this can down the road for 10 years. When do people that support the plan, support the bond issue, it becomes not fiscally responsible for them, because we're doing nothing except Band-Aiding. So I don't have the answers.
We had, to piggyback on kind of what Dr. Whiteley was talking about, we had a really good meeting this morning, Dr. Whiteley, Mr. Hatfield, and I. And I think that we all agree that we need to do a better job of bringing good solutions forward with a big picture, to look at, the alternative school. As soon as you said alternative school choice, it triggered me on that. Things like that, these aren't free.
Right.
These are all decisions. And we need to do a much better job bringing this forward so that the board has a better view of what that actually looks like, because that could be a shift in freeing up some dollars to bring in a temporary modular unit, so that we could then be more efficient with our transportation or something. There's many different things that we need to do a good job looking into. And I think we've had some real eye-openers this fall, or through the fall process, on ways that we can also do a better job with that.
When does the capital, when do we think we'll have that capital plan?
Probably, we anticipated they said about 6 weeks. I think we have that scheduled for,
12th?
I think that's
I don't
about
know why
right.
I'm wanting to say the
Yeah,
12th.
it's not this week, I think
Or
it's next
11th.
week, for them to start, I'm gonna call it the data mining, so that we turn over the data to them, and then they can start working that. Actually, once they have the data is the lift, the input, they can crank that out in about 2 weeks. So I'm hoping by the end of February, 1st of March, that we would have a good skeleton, a good robust skeleton of that plan.
Which could free up figure out how to free up some dollars.
It'll give us a much different viewpoint.
Yeah.
I do want to add just a clarification. Both option C1 and D1 do add the square footage that the district will need to serve the increased capacity and those that are presently at the district. The dollars I think that presented, and Adam could correct me, was kind of determined of, okay, what happens if you keep the millage the same, how much will yield? If that information is accurate, then and what we've learned with the state and bumping up to 33%, that will leave us about 27, 28 million for LFIs. Those LFI funds can be spent as the district chooses. Hopefully, we will be getting credit for those LFI dollars.
What is LFI? Can you?
Yes, which will increase the state share even more. So, but however, there might be some things that the district might pick that aren't necessarily supported by the state, and so those we would not get a matching amount.
So an LFI dollar is a local funded initiative. That means it's something that is not paid for from the plan. It's something we have to fund locally. So if you wanted to do something extra, like a new theater, a fine arts center,
Right.
something like that, then those dollars are dollars.
100%.
100% on us. Yes.
And if those dollars are spent furthering the master plan as approved by the state, then those would be credited. And those can go towards things that are typically being spent through some of your PI funds. Could be roofs, it could be mechanical systems, those kinds of improvements would qualify.
Yep.
So the process is you go through and as you make choices, as you get into the design, it's our job, and Craig will be working closely with us to make sure that you maximize your credits from the state. So that gives you a little bit of breathing room, I think, and a few options for you to think about down the road.
Tom, can you clarify for me? My understanding, and this could be wrong, is that May versus November doesn't change when we would have students in new buildings. If we pass something in November versus passing it in May, the timeline for when we would actually have students in the new buildings would be the same. Is that correct?
It becomes a lot easier if it's in May because you have about a 3-year cycle versus the 2.5. Can it be done in 2.5? Yes. And were we planning on doing it in 2.5 previously? Yes. It just becomes a little bit easier, and the more time you have, the more time the district will have to acclimate to the new building, to what's really called the move-in period. You'll have a little bit more time, but.
And then I had a question for Dr. Whiteley. You talked about kind of the importance of having a strategic plan. It's something that we've been lacking an update for a while. And I know in the past we've said it's really hard to do both of these at the same time, a master facilities and strategic planning. So if we were to say, all right, we're going to look at November for a facilities issue of some sort, would we have time to get strategic planning and master facilities in before November?
So, kind of preparing for the conversation the last couple of weeks, if we choose to go in November, strategic planning would start this spring. Probably around, I'll say probably around March, but we've got negotiations in there to kind of throw in there as well, but probably around March or April. In May, that would be the heavy time. We would do some finessing then in June and July with a rollout to start next year with a solid strategic plan. Launching a new school year with a strategic plan would be very exciting. And the reason I like a strategic plan, I mean, besides the educational value, is it's what's important to you, and you keep using that as your anchor document to make your decisions, right? Because in education, there are lots of trendy things and lots of sexy things, I guess, that can draw your attention, versus this is what we decided is important for our community, and this is our North Star, and we ground our decisions in that, and we keep rooting our decisions in that. It's easier to kind of stay the course, and I think that could certainly hold true, not from educational visioning, but also master facilities planning as well. Now, again, you can do that in the reverse. Again, it's that chicken or the egg, but those are some of the benefits of having that.
And we could do them both. I mean,
But
we
my
could.
question
That's his question.
can we
Do we have the capacity to
do strategic planning and then be able to loop back around to get master facilities on?
In May? Or
Not
in
in
November?
May. If
In
we were
November.
going to do November,
Yes.
would we have time to
yes,
do both?
Yes, because I would figure strategic planning would be done, and then master facilities would kind of launch from that.
Okay, that's one of my big struggles with waiting is that we keep delaying
Right.
I envision
that
it
aspect,
as,
which I think is very important as well.
I think engaging your community, you're engaging your community in strategic planning, and hopefully you just keep that momentum and keep building all the way in through master facilities. You would have an active audience that's engaged in that, and then you would just keep building capacity on top of that.
Adam, with the, sorry, woke you up there now. With the 37-year levy, I believe when you and I had called, you had calculated a 2.12 mil, was that correct, or 2.11?
It's in our
Well,
packet.
I see the resolution that the auditors did is 2.2,
2.2, correct, yeah.
and you had calculated somewhere around there. Is the auditor and your calculations, are they both still an incremental tax decrease estimated?
Yeah, $77, yeah, the roll-off being at 2.24.
Okay.
Which I believe, the conversation we had, I believe that when calculating that out, it's like $1.05 per every 100,000.
Okay, and the auditor still
Maybe.
verifies that, right? Okay, all right, appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the roll-off's based around our amortization schedules that we have. And it would definitely, I don't know what type of disaster would have to happen for it to make sense to refinance debts that are getting ready to expire here in just a couple years. It wouldn't happen.
So does everybody have, because if we're not going to go in May, then we would not take action, so.
Correct.
Well, we still need to call and see if there's motions.
We would see if there's a
to-
motion to take them.
Correct, but prior to, okay, so then I guess we're done having a discussion.
You would see if there was a motion
Well, that's what we did last
to
time.
then have further discussion prior to a vote.
Right.
I will say, and I think I said this to our assistant superintendent the other day, and maybe even to Mr. Zink, take levy off the table. Just
Right.
take that subject off the table, right? And think of any other decision you would make. Buying a car, buying a house, who you marry, all of those things, right? At some point, a decision can seem so laborious that maybe that's the decision. And I'm just going to let that sit there for a second. And I'm going to put it again, not in a levy situation, right? If someone asks you to marry them and you have to go, oh, I got to think about that. That's probably the answer, right? Just saying, right? We continue to labor about this, and we should. It's a huge decision. It is a huge decision. But I think if we are laboring this much, that might be our gut telling us that that is the decision. That's just like I said, I feel like maybe it shouldn't be that hard. And maybe I don't know why it's that hard, but I think that maybe it's more time is needed to have those discussions, to feel confident that we're making that good choice.
Right.
Whether that's community engagement, whether that's the funding source, whether that's the option itself, maybe there just is a timing element here.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, because the resolutions are one or the other. We have to, it's not a,
I mean, we could put both on.
You wouldn't want to put both of them
Yeah.
on. That would not be a
No?
good idea.
people don't like that? Is there anything else?
Give them an option with the ballot.
I mean, especially if we potentially aren't even going to go to a motion and second for further discussion. I think this is it's a hard decision. There's definitely pros and cons. I get why people can argue both sides. I've said that all along. I personally, as I've said before, have some reservations about not having, if I'm confident that we have the permanent improvement dollars, because I do think I don't ever want to put a future board in a situation where they're choosing between allowing kids in third grade to have PE or maintaining our buildings. And so I think when there's dedicated dollars to those particular items, I think that helps take away those decisions and make sure that we do have the best roof and we're not having waterfalls in our buildings. And so I had some concern, as I've expressed, that this plan currently, even though we're thinking it'll free up some other dollars, didn't have that long-term PI there to support those buildings long-term. Again, just my 2 cents. So I appreciate everybody's feedback, and I think we certainly are trying to listen to everyone while making very thoughtful decisions, while still getting the educational impact that we need and respecting the inflation. I mean, there's just a lot of variables, and you can argue yourself both ways very easily. And I think we probably all have at one point or another.
Yeah. And I also worry that since there is so many variables, I don't know what I want. I don't want to put this on and then we're going to need an operating levy because we didn't consider all the variables.
No matter what type of conversations we've had and agree, disagree, all the above, I do know that everybody sitting up here does not want to ask the community for any more than we need.
Correct.
And that's important. It's important that, you know, no matter what directions we choose to go, that we always stay focused on that, and, you know, that's a good thing.
Does everybody feel like they've had enough conversation, enough discussion, and have had enough questions? I know I don't want to get to a point where somebody doesn't feel like they've had enough discussion or information.
I'm good.
You're good?
I just want to say, you know, we have a lot of questions, and we have, you know, this board asking questions. At this meeting where there's a resolution to put something on the ballot, and there's still a lot of questions, and there's still questions asked. Can we promise the community, if we put a 37-year levy, are we going to have to, within the 37 years, go for an operating levy, right? I think there is a lot of expectations that, you know, we're just one and done. And, you know, I don't really think that that's necessarily realistic, but I can share a little bit of that sentiment. We're asking for any amount of money. I think the community wants to know that this is going to solve a lot of our issues. You know, having toured the schools with, or, you know, at least some of the problem schools with Dr. Whiteley, the urgency isn't lost on me of some sort of fix. You know, cutting specials and the urgencies of not why we shouldn't do that is not lost on me. I have two sisters who enjoy music, they enjoy PE, they enjoy art, right? I don't want to have to be backed into a corner where we do have to cut programs, but also I don't want to jump into an impulsive decision because we're, you know, making a decision out of the fear of what could be. You know, just kind of using an analogy here, we had a lot of snow, and we have a pretty big driveway, and my brother's 17-year-old mindset was, well, let's just put gasoline on it and see what happens. And we have a wooden house, so I don't want to burn the house down because, you know, we were jumping to a quick decision. And like Dr. Whiteley said, 2 no's is going to be disastrous. So I think that in making a thoughtful decision, I think that there is still more time needed to contribute to making a thoughtful decision. And that is why I would still urge this board to at least consider November and take May off the table.
So I want to make a comment on that because I want to be clear with the community. None of this is going to magically solve where we won't be needing funding for another 37 years.
Right.
Like, that's not how funding works in Ohio.
Right.
And it's not lost on me that this community was built on a community that invested in education. So if I look at before the year 2008, this community, on average, every 3 years was passing either a bond levy or an operating levy to build the foundations of the education system that we have in this community today. And then after 2008, everything kind of changed. And until 2013, there wasn't another levy passed. And now we've gone through an entire generation of students who've gone through our buildings where this community hasn't been asked, or actually has not even been asked, except for last fall, to actually contribute more to the education in our community. And that's disturbing to me because we have one of the lowest effective tax rates of any of our peer communities, districts that are our peer districts, those communities. So if you want to go to a comparable school district and you go elsewhere, your effective tax rate is going to be much higher than it is here today in Liberty Township and Westchester. And when we look at the amount of funding that we put towards our students' education versus all the districts that people look at that they want to be like, it pales in comparison. So for me, it's not that we're going to build new buildings and magically make it where we don't ever have to come back to the taxpayers for more money. We have to fix funding in Ohio so that the burden isn't on property taxes and property owners. And we need to talk to our community about investment instead of what we've been saying for 8 years, which is fiscally responsible. And I've heard it from that side of the table, and I've heard it from this side of the table. And every time we say fiscally responsible, it means cheap. It is the lowest price, absolutely. It's why we haven't gone back since 2013, except for last fall. And now we're hemming and hawing now. If we have plans that we know will deliver better educational outcomes for our students, and we communicate that to our families, I believe that people will show up and they'll vote yes. And that's what we need to do. We need to challenge ourselves to come up with plans that are exciting, that will deliver educational opportunities, and have commitments behind them that people will respond to, instead of just trying to say that, oh, well, we can do this here and we won't have to come back for 32 years.
Anyone else? Alex, are you thinking, or?
I mean, I'm thinking, I think how we've gotten to where we're at right now is exactly what Doug said. We've continued to, just kick the can down the road, and whatever we do, it doesn't seem like it's going to be in May, but we need to make sure that we don't just continue to come back with either wait until we have a plan that fixes everything, because I don't think there's a plan that will fix everything that we can get the community behind. I think what we learned in November was that price is too much. We need to break this up into smaller pieces and kind of retrain the community that, we can do this bit by bit, and once we continue to make those investments, we'll be in a better place. So I just want to caution us not to continue to wait until we find that perfect plan that has all the PI dollars, or it has the money to do all the LFIs that we want. At some point, we need to do something. And then we can build trust with the community more to do the next thing, to continue investing in our schools. So,
I mean, as of right now, schools are still funded by property taxes, and there's no way around that. The funding system is broken, and we know that they've been working over the last several years to try to fix it. There's not a lot of will in the legislature to institute what was done, but we continue to work on that. And you're right, to that end, that's how schools are funded right now, and we cannot, I agree, we cannot continue to kick the can down the road. I think it was a great thing that we stretched our last operational levy that long, and I also think it was maybe not a great thing. I think and I'm not blaming anybody or saying that's anybody's fault, but in trying so hard to stretch those dollars, we may have done some damage. So we do have to, again, there will still be bond issues and levies in the state of Ohio at this moment as we know it. So I would agree. Okay, anybody else? Anything else before we move on? I am going to take them separately. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I'm going to take them separately since they're two separate items. So do I have a motion for 9A, which is the resolution for my screen is not dark enough. 30 year. Do I have a motion for the 30 year? Okay. Do I have a motion for the 37 year? Okay. It looks like we will not be on the ballot in May. I need a motion for treasurer's recommendations A and B, which is approval of board minutes and approval of monthly financials. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
second.
Any questions, discussions? Adam, anything you want to say?
Yeah, there was, the minutes and the financials wasn't on the last meeting, and so these are caught up now, put on this meeting.
Okay. You may call the roll.
Mr. Horton?
Was that me? Sorry.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Argo?
Yes.
Mr. Wynn?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Casper?
Yes. Need a motion to approve superintendent recommendation A, which is approve donations.
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussions? All right. Mr. Zink?
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Argo?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Wynn?
Yes.
Ms. Casper?
Yes. All right, we are on closing comments. Mr. Wynn, we'll start with you.
I just want to say congratulations to our Firebirds on a fantastic performance on Friday night, both the men and women's varsity teams. Keep making us proud, and thank you to this community for the opportunity to serve.
Mr. Argo?
So I was really disappointed that I could not make it to the East-West games this last Friday. I had a prior engagement, but the thing that that I always think is really cool is I was able to catch up with the student broadcasting broadcast of it on YouTube, and like the production value is insane. So I maybe they could come to our board meetings. I don't know, but yeah, I really appreciate them, and I hope they continue to do that. And that's all I really have today.
Nights of acronyms. I was going to say congratulations or thank you to everyone who participated in the OMEAs, and I think it's Ohio Music Education Association, but I'm not positive, but close enough. So we were well represented. Again, always great to be at the East-West game, and the Firecrackers are a jump rope group that came and performed at halftime. They were amazing. So jump ropes at a whole nother level. So thank you for whomever arranged that. Again, I know for Dr. Whiteley, we've already talked a little bit about the custodians, but thank you for all the hard work, as well as the decision-making of, I feel like Mr. Hatfield has, and as well as you, probably have not slept much in a couple weeks because you're up at 3 in the morning and checking everything out. And so thank you for all that work, and for our partners at Peterman for that work as well.
Dr. Whiteley?
Speaking of snow, I am literally just watching the fanfare of who is doing what right now. We're not there yet, Mr. Horton. But again, just, the spring is kind of an interesting time because you're still in a year, but you're getting and gearing up for the next year. So I know our students are scheduling and talking about registration, and that's always an exciting time when you start to kind of get in kind of 2-year modes, right? Looking back and looking in the current, but also looking forward. And so I think it's going to be an exciting spring, and clearly will be an exciting fall as we move into as well.
I will echo the broadcasting. I watched the production on YouTube of the men's basketball game, and they did a really nice job. It was very exciting to watch. Lincoln did ask me why there wasn't any sound when there was timeouts. They didn't have any sound. Maybe we get some elevator music or something might be helpful. But it really is amazing how clear the picture is and how good that production was. It was really nice. Back to the meeting we had today at Hamilton. Several years back, somebody that has been in this a lot longer than I had made the comment that when they don't want to give you new money, they give you a new formula. And today was the first time I had heard reference to, we're working on a new formula at the State House. Ugh. And that's something that the person that made that statement, one of the things that they said was, in 40 years of doing this, I've never seen a formula that wouldn't work if it was just funded. Yep. So all formulas will work if the funding's there to pull them off. So that's something that I hope as we've all become much more aware with property tax reforms and all the hot topics that we've had in relation to everything under the sun in the state of Ohio that the governments may pay for, that's something to be aware that everybody needs to make sure that they're communicating with the people that are elected to represent them what priorities are and should be, because that's where the changes are going to happen. So, that's something that it was a little concerning knowing that we had just went through an overhaul, which I believe if you look at the timeline, most of these formulas will last anywhere between 6 to 10 years. And with this one now hitting year 6, and we're still in 21 funding, yep. Fiscal year 21, what would work? It doesn't matter what the mechanism is if the funding's not there to support it. So that might be something to stay tuned with and be aware of as we move forward.
Well, I'm going to pick up that torch and that baton and carry it a little bit because, Mrs. Casper, you mentioned that there's no way to get around it because of how there is if the legislature has will. Right. And I think that's the biggest thing is when I look at the hurdles that the legislators were trying to tie themselves into, or knots, I guess not hurdles, but knots that they were tying themselves into this summer as they were trying to figure out how to fix some of the problems as the funding formula was breaking down. It all went back to the original decision to not fully fund the agreed upon bipartisan fair funding formula. And had that funding been in place instead of billion-dollar initiatives elsewhere in the government of Ohio, amazing how much of those tweaks that they tried to do this summer wouldn't have been needed. And again, as we're looking at the people's reaction to property taxes, that's what local districts have had to do, is without having the agreed upon funding, we've had to come to taxpayers across Ohio from a property tax and income tax level. There's plenty of districts that have done a blended model as well, but they're putting more of the burden on the local taxes because the state is not living up to their commitments. And so I will just reiterate that. I wish we could get some more will from the legislature there. On a second front, really, we commended the staff that did a great job. I was not here, I was out of town, but I was watching everything on social and hearing all the phone calls and all that. I just want to take a moment to thank all the parents who came together to deal with the obstacles. So the weather has been a really interesting issue, and it's not lost on me that our community is a great community, but we don't have necessarily some of the amenities that make it easy for bus stops to happen when you have a foot of snow. You know, we've had a number of safety issues. We worry about lighting, we worry about sidewalks, safe places for our students, and this snow really just amplified that effect. And I saw a lot of parents rallying together, doing, you know, carpools, getting kids to school, dealing with the time changes and stuff. So really appreciate how this community always comes together when we're dealing with something like this. And it makes it easier for us to make the best decisions for students to not lose learning, which is something that we don't want to do. And then I just want to reiterate, Dr. Whiteley, my son's going through the enrollment for next year, and every year, I did this with my daughter and him, especially at the high school level, but even at the junior high level, I'm amazed at the number of opportunities that the curriculum department and this district offers. I'll say my students, right, my kids. When I compare to the options that I had when growing up, we had electives, but not career-defining, you know, tracks that we could go on. And it's great to see my son struggle with the choices of, he wants to do all these engineering classes, but he wants to do these art classes too. But then he has this goal of being in the top 25. And so it's just really fun to watch him wrestle with that, because he's blessed with a wealth of opportunity. And it doesn't make those decisions easier, but it is fun that he has those options. So kudos to our curriculum and all the staff that do such a great job providing those opportunities for our students.
Mrs. Schaefer has an addendum to her closing comments.
I apologize. I had forgotten to bring this at the last meeting, so I didn't want to not do it again. Our Butler Tech Trophy from the student showcases, where I'd previously announced that we had the most participation of evaluations at the student showcases, but because of that, we won our own Grammy, I guess. So since it was the Grammys last night, I think
Yeah,
perhaps
it was.
it's appropriate that that's tonight. So anyway, just wanted to.
And
I
that's
should have said
for,
that on my way by.
because our board went and evaluated the most sessions at the all boards showcase meeting. So, basically, when it gets to the president, there's not a lot to say, just ditto. I do want to say I do love the community feel of the East-West game, and even though it was hotter than blazes in there with all those people, but it's always a great community event, and it's great to see both sides of town, while be rivals, have a good, decent game. So it was a fun night. With that, I will call for a motion to enter into executive sessions to conference with legal counsel concerning disputes that are subject of pending or imminent court action, and to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Zink?
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Argo,
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen,
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes. And when we come back, we will be taking no action other than to adjourn.
All right.
Mike's on?
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Yeah.
Adam, call the roll, please.
Mr. Argo?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Ms. Casper?
Yes.
And meeting adjourned. 8:38.
On those ones.
Yeah, right?